Hello and welcome to the 8th video tutorial in the beginner MERN stack tutorial series. In the last video we had seen about how we can connect the form to our backend so that when we press submit button the record gets added to our database. In this video we are going to try to populate this data into a table so that it becomes more presentable and readable. So let us start by building a table component first, which will be showing it within our app.js file. So let's go to the components folder. Here we are creating a functional component and we'll say for now table of items. Now we want to import it inside our app.js component. Just copy it. And we'll call it table. Now let's write table here so that it's rendered. My server is running, so let's go and check on the browser. Okay, if we refresh, it says table of items, which is coming from the table component. Now inside our table.js component we need to have access to all the items that are there in the database using the get request, and the path is show. So we'll be using axios here once more, so let's import it. Once this is done, we want to fire this get request whenever the component is loaded. Okay, and that can be achieved by making use of a lifecycle hook which is called use effect. Use effect is similar to component did mount. If you have done state-based React components, then you might be aware. So we'll say use effect, and this is how the function looks. So based on our use, we are going to remove the following part, and we are also going to remove the input. Now what does this mean is this has two parts. First part is a callback function, and second part specifies the arguments to use effect. If you keep it as blank or empty, it basically means that whenever it mounts for the first time, only then this callback function is supposed to be executed. So we are going to write our axios request, axios.get, and first parameter is the path, which is /show. Now this is a promise based function, so it will have .then and .catch parts. .then and .catch. We want to print the error if we get any, so we'll write a console.log. And inside the then part we'll be getting the data, so we write a fat arrow function. So when this request is triggered, then whatever is the response, that will be contained within D. Now we are going to take the response and store it in a local variable. So let's declare that local variable, and since we want to use that variable in order to do state management, we are going to make use of use state. And since it will be an array, So we are specifying an empty array as the initial value of useState. Now we'll call this by the name data, and the variable used for setting it will be called setData. So what we want to do is, whenever useEffect executes the axios get request, we want to store the data that we retrieve into an array which is locally called data, and we'll be using setData for it. So we'll say set data and set the data to d.data. So now once this runs, data will be having the retrieved array of objects from our database. Let's print it out and have a look if we are getting the desired result. I'll be using the json.stringify method for the same. We have not imported useEffect here. Let me include that as well. Okay, now it seems to be running. Let's go and check. Alright, so since we are just printing it out, we can see table of items contains the following data, which is coming from the DB. Now if we remember from our last video, we had pushed a record called item 4 with quantity 10 and rate as 40. Hence the data is being retrieved using the get method. Now we want to represent this in a tabular format so that it looks proper. So instead of just doing json.stringify, we want to have a table here. We'll say table, and inside that we'll have two parts. One would be the head part and the other would be the body part. So thead and tbody respectively. Inside the head we are going to have a row, a single row, so tr, and now we'll specify the different labels or the headers that we are going to have. So we'll say th, and let me copy this over 3 times. So first column would be serial number, second would be name of the item, third would be quantity, and fourth would be rate. Similarly, we are going to have the respective rows. So for that we will say tbody, and inside this we are going to use the map method in order to render a table. So we are going to say data dot map, and the map method will have a function within it, a callback function, and whatever variable we use here, that will contain the individual values of the array that we have. So if data has 4 elements, item will store item 1, item 2 through item 4 at different times. So this is how it looks. Now here we also have something called as key, and key is something which we get along with the map method, which can be used in order to index or number the rows. So we'll say return, and we want this to return a table row, okay, which will contain the values for different value item. So we'll say return, we want a table row inside this we want different values for each item inside the array data. So we'll say and let me just copy it over. So our first is serial number, so we'll be using this key. So we'll say key item dot name is okay. We want item dot quantity here, and at the end we want item dot rate. So now the map method will return a single tr which contains all these values in different columns. Let's go and check if we are getting a table there. Refresh it and we can see that we have a table. Let us remove the previous data that we are getting through json.stringify method, and we'll have our table. We'll get rid of this and we'll call this as an h2 okay. Now it looks better, but I'll be adding some CSS so that this table gets aligned just below table of items. After adding some CSS, this is how our table looks. Let's add another item to the list. Item 550 and 100. We'll say add item. Once we refresh this, we can see item 5, 50 and 100. This is what we added currently. So our data is being added. In next tutorial, we'll be looking at how we can add a button over here with which we can perform operations such as delete. So see you in the next one.